Welcome to the What Makes a Great Trial Judge podcast, part of the Lawyer Minds ecosystem. We've paired up with Lisa Blue, a practicing psychologist of 46 years and trial attorney of 44 years, to discuss some of the ways trial judges, especially those dealing with trauma-intensive cases, can improve their techniques and social practices, making the litigation experience more meaningful for jurors and litigants alike. So, how do you tell the difference between a great trial judge and one who needs to work on their social intelligence skills? Let's find out. We'll be interviewing some of the greatest trial judges around who offer tips for improvement and share their secrets. And with that, here's your host, Lisa Blue.
Will you introduce yourself? As you know, I'm Lisa Blue, and Judge Parish, it's nice to see you. So introduce yourself for the audience.
Okay, well, my name is Lauren Parish, and I am, I grew up, born and raised in Gilmer, Upshur County, Texas. Went to college, graduated from the University of Texas at Austin, and then went to Baylor Law School. After law school, I clerked I was a briefing attorney for the Sixth Court of Appeals in Texarkana. After that, I came back to Gilmer, Texas to practice law with my father, Welby Parish, who passed away in 87, and practiced with him until his death. And then after that, was in private practice until I ran for office and was elected to the 115th District Court, which is a court of general jurisdiction, and it's a two-county court. So it's Upshur and Marion counties. And I was the first female elected in Upshur County. They said it couldn't be done, and I guess they were wrong. I was elected. I beat two opponents, one in the primary and one in the general election. And I ran unopposed every election season after that, and retired in 2018 and took senior status. So I still sit and hear cases by assignment. Yes, I was on the bench for 24 years and had those two counties. And we had a very active court. So that's basically my schooling and work bio.
What was it that made you, and I know I happen to know this because I've known of you for a long time because you have a wonderful reputation.
Oh.
And I know that your dad was a very well-known, was he a plaintiff's lawyer, I believe?
He was. Mm-hmm.
And did you used to go watch him in court, or what was it that clicked?
I did. I did. I'm the oldest of three children, and I was the one that wanted to follow in his footsteps. And I don't know. I always thought it was exciting, and I always thought it was a noble cause. And anytime I got an opportunity to go watch him, that's what I did. And he was a very good trial lawyer and very, very good cross-examiner, and did a lot of good for people. And I saw that, and it inspired me, and he inspired me. Funny thing, or it's not funny, but just something sort of noteworthy is that I realized those were big shoes to fill. And I also realized at a young age, early on in my practice, that you cannot have the same style as another lawyer. You are yourself, and you need to use your own strong points and your own talents. And although I have a lot of similarities to my father's character, I was not the kind of lawyer that he was, and my skills were a little different. And I was interested, after I clerked for the Court of Appeals, I was always interested in the judiciary also. So I always wanted to be a judge. And also it took me out of that umbrella shadow that I was under with my father, because now because it wouldn't have mattered what I did, good, bad, ugly, win, lose, whatever. I went my own path and did my own thing and paved my own ground, which I needed it. And it was what I wanted to do. So but that's he was the reason I got into the law, and I admired him and his work and his talent. So.
Right. And I know for some of the people that are watching this podcast, there are probably going to be some younger women in smaller towns. And I just wonder if you have advice in what still feels like sometimes a male dominated culture in the small towns. How did you deal with that? Or how did you?
And I always forgot my gender. I always forgot that I was female. And I would have issues that would arise with conflicts, not in the courtroom, but when you're a district judge, you get to deal with county commissioners and other county offices, and they typically tend to be, male, and things would happen, or there would be little. I would be wondering, why are these people acting like this toward me? Why is this? And then somebody said, well, you know why that is? You're a woman. I'm like, oh, well, maybe. I think that's gotten a lot better, because we as women have inundated, the profession and the judiciary. When I first got into office, I went to my first judicial conference. Actually, it was the new judges school that they had. And I remember looking around, and there were not that many women. And then every year it's just more and more and more. But I didn't, like I said, they said, it can't be done. A woman can't win. Well, I didn't believe it. And I also, like I said, I forgot my gender. I forget. So I never wore it on my sleeve. I never, and they had to remind me that maybe this is why there's an issue. Maybe this is why the commissioners don't want to fund this for you, or whatever. They want to cut your funds, or they want to, or what the reason they're wanting to pick a fight with you over, the jail or the this or the that. But most of those problems resolve themselves within, a couple of terms, and it kind of leveled out. But I don't really know. I think the lawyers, the male lawyers, don't, for the most part, treat women any differently that I've seen in my experience. And I really, that's the best I can do on that. I don't know. And those cultural problems that exist, I really don't know if they're there, I don't know how you fix them, except just keep trotting on and do you.
Being a judge in a small town, did you ever feel like the male lawyers would talk down or mansplain, or did you ever have any feelings like that they saw you as different?
Very, very rarely. And interestingly enough, the only time that comes to mind that I can remember happened to be a gentleman who had been on the Texas Supreme Court, who was no longer there, and came to court and for a hearing. And that was the only time anybody ever I guess it wasn't really mansplaining. It was just really kind of rude, but typically not. I mean, they treated me with respect. And I think a lot of it is, if you treat people with respect, they're going to treat you back with respect. And it's really hard for somebody to be disrespectful to you if you're showing them the respect that they should receive. So, and I always tried to do that. I tried to, I tried to always bear in mind and respect the lawyers, because I think it's very important for judges, and this would go for even, I believe, even appellate judges. It's quite beneficial to have been a trial lawyer before you're a judge, either in a trial court or an appellate court, because until you've walked a few miles in those shoes, you cannot understand what it's like to be a lawyer. And I think you need to. So I think I got off track.
No, you're perfect. Did you have mentors as a judge for different?
I did, but you understand that when you're a judge, your only mentors can really be judges if you're ethical, because you really can't. And that's one thing when you get elected, especially if you're in a small town, when you get elected, all of your friends have typically been lawyers, right? Because that's your profession. And so now you're in a situation where you might have used to use friends to, talk about different issues or run things by. Well, you don't have that avenue anymore. So you talk to fellow judges. And I had several early on in my career. One of the administrative judges for used to be the first region, Jim Zimmerman, who was an older judge, kind of took me under his wing and helped me out a lot and helped me with the local politics and things like that. Also, my partner judge in Marion County, because Marion County is shared by the 276 district, and at that time it was Judge William Porter, and he was I had known him forever. He was a friend of my father's growing up, so I knew him as a young person, and so I'd known him all my life almost. And so we now shared a court, and he was very helpful to me. And other judges in the area, they were all very, very helpful. And most of them at that time were older than me. It turned out that later on they were all younger than me, but they were very helpful. So yeah, I don't know what I'd have done without some of them early on.
Looking back at your career, do you have any regrets that by the way you handled it, or any advice about, gee, I wish I had known that back then, or done something different? Anything that sticks in your mind?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of things. I'm not going to be like some people we know that can't remember anything they ever did wrong. I'm sure I could have. I before we started this, I sat down and I made a list of things that make good judges, or what I think qualities. And in the list, some of the things that I could have been more patient sometimes, because it's really hard to in a general jurisdiction court, especially when you're hopping from family law to first degree felonies to complex civil litigation to appealed probate cases to commercial issues to it's but there were, as far as my decisions in cases, honestly, I don't, there's not any that I regret. Now, I always told the lawyers, and I didn't have an ego in the sense that if I'm wrong, the Court of Appeals will correct me, and I'm okay with that. That's what they're for, and that's and I wasn't reversed very often at all. Very, very few reversals, and we tried a whole lot of cases. But as far as the decisions, no. But as far as being patient, I could have been a little more patient, because I'm not a real. I like to move things along, and I can slow down a little bit. It's my nature in everything I do. So that would be one area.
You brought up a list, and I'm so glad and grateful that you took the time to really be thoughtful and put down on paper, what do you think makes a really great trial judge?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked this because I've been excited about writing these. I wrote them down, and there's 4 main things, and there's a bunch of other little things. But I started looking at the emotional intelligence articles and stuff because I'd never really even thought about it. When you said that, I thought, well, that's reading the room, which is, and that's important, but maybe not in the way some people think of it. But first of all, if I were telling somebody, if somebody wanted to be a judge, I would say these are definitely things that you need these top 4 things. And one is you must love and be fascinated by the law and lawyers. You've got to like lawyers. If you don't, and you don't like the law, just get out of here. Secondly, you must love and be fascinated by people, because you're going to be, you're in the people job. If you're a trial judge, you've got jurors, you've got litigants, you've got lawyers, you've got court reporters, you've got the media, you've got the audience, you've got the clerks, court staff, but you need to love everybody. You need to give everybody respect. And this next one is really important, because this is something that can get you, and it's hard. It's the hardest thing, because the other things, it's easy to love the law and it's easy to love people and be fascinated by people in the law, but you've got to have moral courage, because there are times, and it's a really lonely job, because being a judge is a lonely job. And you've got to make decisions that are not popular. And if you're not willing to do that, and there are people who are not, and they're swayed by politics, or they're swayed by something else. But you've got to have that moral courage. And you've got to be independent. That's the 4th one, which is kind of the same. It goes into the moral courage, but you got to be independent. You can't, when your friends come, one of the hardest things in the world is ruling against your friend, and you have to do it, and it's hard, and it never gets any easier. But you have to do it, and at the end of the day, they respect you for it. I have a lot of other words too, if you want me to go through some of them.
Well, before you do that, I'm just so fascinated about the one moral courage, and I'm wondering if you have an example or a short story that really demonstrates something that you had to do that was just so hard emotionally, and how you handled it with emotional and social intelligence.
Well, there's one case I have. I wish I had more time to think about other examples, but the one that sticks with me, because it stuck with me for so many reasons. And it was a criminal case, and it was an intoxication manslaughter case. And I had others of those, and this, we kind of get into the emotional intelligence part here, because it's all in the moral courage. It's all when you have to have empathy and emotional intelligence as a judge. I don't care what anybody says. If you're going to determine whether a witness is credible or not, how can you do that if you don't take life experiences and your ability to empathize and all of those things into consideration? Well, anyway, it's a terrible case, terribly tragic case. There were two victims, a little boy who happened to be about the same age as my son at the time, which made it all the more worse. And then his mother were the deceased. And the defendant was a young man who had no criminal history. And by the way, you will hear people, if you ask about me, they will tell you that I was a law enforcement judge. I was the, and I was pretty tough. Anyway, so the young man, no criminal history, and had been working like, I don't know, 12 hours or more, a long time. I don't remember those details really. But anyway, he was driving home from work, stopped and got, I'm sure he testified, probably a couple of beers. Everybody only has a couple of beers, but he then left that place and fell asleep. Yeah, I can't remember what his blood alcohol was, and that's really irrelevant at this point. But he testified, he testified. I don't know if he testified in both stages or just punishment phase, but he was so broken up and so destroyed, and I'm not trust me, my heart is with the victims too. I mean, it's just very emotional time. Anyway, so I sentenced him to the max, which was on both cases. So there were 2 cases, and the state wanted me to stack them. I had a courtroom full of mad mothers, and I did not stack them. So they ran concurrently. And as soon as the trial was over, of course, I'm all over the radio. Mad Mothers is, persecuting me, and all this. And I understand their anger, but I also had never the remorse and agony that he was going through too. I do believe he was remorseful, and that was rare. Rare that I saw that. But that's one example of, I could have stacked them, been easy. For him, it would just have been another, year or 2 in prison, as it would have turned out. But there was a lot of public pressure, pressure, and there's a lot of cases like that where you have that issue. But that's one that always, because I think, like I said, because the child was about my son's age, so I'll never forget it.
I can tell that.
Yeah, I'll never forget it.
So you said that there were some other smaller things. I'd love to know what your thoughts are about other things that judges can do to be a great trial judge.
Oh, okay. Well, patience is one. I told you that's very important. You have to be a good listener, but that goes with being interested and interested. If you're, and I believe this is, I think, I don't care what profession you're in, if you're dealing with people, you need to be interested. And if you're interested, you're also interesting. And if you're interesting, people tend to like you a little better. Obviously being respectful, to all people and the dignity of all people, to the people who have nothing, the people who are wealthy, the people who all walks of life. I think you need to be intuitive, and that's part of making a decision on whether somebody's credible. I'm going through, so I'm not going to read all of these, but obviously you need common sense. You need to be efficient. It's very important that you are courteous to everyone. Being a trial judge, the most important thing in the courtroom is the jury. And there's a lot of, I often referred to myself in the jury when I'm doing jury trials is as a flight attendant, because you're managing a lot of things. You're wanting to make sure everybody's comfortable, the jury especially, and that they feel safe, that you're going to take care of them. Again, empathy comes in, because you don't know if this lady's got a sick child at home, or the man's or the woman's going to lose their job if they, they're not, and they're there and they don't want to be there. All of those things come into play. You need to be courteous of their time. I know some judges who will let trials go on into the night, and jurors who have an hour drive home and to the courthouse, and they don't think twice about it. But those kind of things. So I think you're like a flight attendant. I also think you're like an orchestra conductor, because but you've got to be in control of it. You got to make sure the trombones come in when they're supposed to, and not over the violins or whatever. And you got to juggle everything. I mean, and you've got to, and all the while you need a rapport. You need a rapport with everyone in the courtroom. And you don't need to be dogmatic. You don't need to be the ego in the room. You need to be somebody they feel like they can trust, somebody that they can warm up to, and basically like you. Not everybody's going to like you, but respect you. you need to be confident, but not arrogant. And that's, some people get judge-itis. They get a little pompous, but you don't, if you're just confident and let everybody feel comfortable in that they know who's in charge and it's all okay. And I'm going to get my time and they're going to get their time, and she's going to rule on it. She's going to look at both sides the same way, and she's going to make a decision that she thinks is right according to the law. So
after talking to people that know you, several, one of the best compliments I heard is that you did a magnificent job of how you controlled your courtroom. I'd love to hear your thoughts for the other judges, because people felt that you were respectful, but you still had this wonderful control and tight so that people knew where they stood. Can you talk to me about that?
Well, it's hard. I don't really know. To be honest with you, you can't ever let it get out of control. You've got to always run a tight ship, but at the same time, you don't run with a heavy hand. So I really don't know. I'm happy that people think that of my courtroom, but I'm not really sure how I did, except that I never let it get out of control. And there were people, it doesn't take you long. Sometimes by reputation, and sometimes by experience before, for the first time in front of you, lawyers who will try to have control and overrun the court. But once by reputation or by experience, how to stop that before it happens. Right. But that was rare. And most of the time it was, I found people are, and maybe it's just because we're in a small town, but people are generally respectful of the courts. As time went by, from 95 to 2018, it got less. There's a difference. There was a difference in the way the public looked at the court. Now it's just completely different. There's no respect for anything anymore, especially the rule of law. Right. But that's one thing I thought of that I would say to you, if it was relevant, and maybe it will be, is that, as a judge, you inherit respect because you represent the rule of law. You put on that robe, and and I say this, but I'm not sure it's the same anymore, because I don't know about the rule of law, and it really, really breaks my heart. But we'll assume that there still is rule of law. And assuming that when you put that robe on, you inherit that respect for that rule of law. But it's not you. Yes, they respect you, but you inherit this respect, and you've got to nourish that respect. You have to be held to a higher standard, because you are the caretaker of that respect for the rule of law. Therefore, you need to carry yourself outside the courtroom in a way different than others. You've got to make sure you don't get in trouble. All of those things, because it's that important. And it's not the respect that you got, it's the respect that you inherited because of the position that you are in, that you were fortunate enough to be in. So that's kind of how I felt about it.
Well, in closing, since I assume you're probably gonna have female, young and old people who are in cities, judges who are in cities and small town. Is there any wise words that you would give to the judges that are watching or listening to this, based on all your years of experience?
I think I gave you all my last words I had. Every decision that you make should be based with that moral courage, so that when you go home at night and you look in the mirror, you can look at yourself and know that you made a decision based on what was right, and that nothing else entered into that and colored that decision in any way. That's the hardest thing. I mean, it's not hard after you do it, so to speak, because you can go home and look at yourself in the mirror and go, thank goodness I did the right thing. But and you might can help me. I forget what famous was it Teddy Roosevelt, or do the right thing and suffer the consequences. I forget who to attribute the quote to, but that's basically how it is. But you got to do the right thing, and that's integrity, and that kind of weaves itself into what I was just saying about the rule of law and carrying yourself. Judges should be the epitome of integrity, and that's not a pompous or an arrogant or a stuck up kind of thing. It's trying to do good and be a good person, because you need to be a good person to be a good judge. In my opinion. And I'm not saying I'm a good person, because I never said I was a good judge, but I think that you need to be.
Well, other people, sure. Many people have said it about you. And you've earned such a wonderful reputation over the years. And I'm just so honored to talk to you about it.
Well, that's humbling hearing that. So it's heartwarming for sure.
When you're gone, and people are talking about you, what would you like your legacy to be?
That she did the right thing. That's it. Pretty much.
Well, that's beautifully said, short. And to the point. I can see why people feel that way about you.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for giving your time. And I certainly learned so much, and I really appreciate that you stopped to give your words of wisdom, because they were very...
Well, I'm sorry I didn't have more little vignettes. You would think you would remember more after 24 years, and I've got a lot of funny ones, but
Well,
I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Judge. Have a great day.
Thank you.
I hope to meet you in person sometime.
I do too. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Bye-bye.
That concludes this episode of What Makes a Great Trial Judge, part of the Lawyer Minds ecosystem. We hope you'll take some of these trial tips and incorporate them in your everyday practice to improve the litigation process for everyone involved. Please consider subscribing to this podcast and take some time to explore the other content Lawyer Minds has to offer. Your feedback and ideas are always welcome. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.